As staff, I'll call the meeting to order. And your first order of business on the agenda is to vote on a calendar. I had sent out a survey to the members, and Thursdays at 9 a.m. seemed to be a good time. So one of our admins drew up the schedule. You don't have to, this was just our suggestion. So if people want to suggest other dates and times, that's fine. But is that schedule okay with people?
That works for me.
Yeah, it looked fine. It looked good.
Okay, then I think if someone would move to adopt the schedule.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, you need to elect a chairman and a vice chairman. It shouldn't be a staff member. It should be a member of the public. So are there any nominations for chairman? Any volunteers?
If no volunteers, I'll volunteer.
Okay. Do I have a second for the nomination of John Zagrodzky?
This is a giant vote of confidence in them.
I'll second it.
I'm going to have to
Okay.
get medication or therapy.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then John, I'm going to turn it to you.
So thanks, Kate. I want to make this a collective effort, but I'll just start off by saying that I think the genesis for this committee, particularly because we've got a new administration, which by its nature suggests that we ought to take a fresh look at a lot of things, and this is on the list. I think the main point of this committee is severalfold. One is just to take a step back and look at and gather information about and communicate how IT is managed in this town. I think the first step is to define IT and say, here's what we mean by that and what's reasonably included in it. And here are the things that are not part of that. And so one of the things we ought to do in either potentially this meeting or in subsequent meetings is to think about sort of what we want to include in the world of IT as we address this. The second thing I would say is after we've defined all this is to try and take an inventory of what and how and who, right? So what are we doing right now and how are we spending money on it? How are we getting it done, right? Where are the power centers, who decides things, who all is involved in that? And then as we think about those two things, to take one further step back and say, is there a way to maybe freshen that up a bit, right? I'm not saying that any radical measures are needed. One of the things that I would emphasize, certainly under Jeff's leadership and many of the professionals who are associated with or have a hand in the IT strategy for the town. And when I say that, I mean sort of town and school system. You look at the complexity of all that and how that service is delivered. And if the only metric is, does it work? And have we avoided any cyber disasters? Yes, it does work. And yes, we have avoided those disasters. I think that's really a great compliment and kudo to the professionals who are associated with this. And so I want to just call that out and make sure that that's logged for everybody to hear and understand. That's a great thing that you guys have done. So the purpose of this effort is not corrective in nature, right? It's not looking back and saying we have all these terrible problems. It's really great to fantastic, right? How do we take something that's great, take a fresh look at it? Is there some way to make it even better? Or if nothing else, assist the professionals in maybe removing roadblocks or trying to determine the things that they wish they could do better. They wish were working better, but simply can't do because there's some obstacle, whether procedural or financial or something like that. And so I'd really like this committee to take a discrete time period. I don't want to make this a permanent committee where we're futzing around with this for years, but to take the time to do the assessment that I'm talking about, which is first definitional. Second is what are we doing it? How are we doing it? And who's doing it? And then third, identify opportunities for improvement. And the improvement could be in technology, in budgeting, in process, in leadership, in staffing. All of those types of things, I think, are reasonable candidates to inspect and review to see if we could do something better. I think in the end, what we ideally like to do is take the recommendations of this committee and present them to the Board of Selectmen and say, based on our assessment, we think there are the following areas for improvement, which they could then modify, approve, and then subsequently recommend funding for, and then go from there and take the Board of Finance and the RTM. So as I've thought about it, this is kind of what I think presents the opportunity for this committee. But I would invite everyone's input. Of course, this really should be a collaborative effort. So does anyone have any comments, reactions, their own thoughts on what we could perhaps accomplish? Does that sound right?
To me, so I'm going to stand up for half a second and just say I apologize. I know I missed the first meeting in November. I'm David Young. I'm was director of IT for a small marketing company up in Hartford when I applied to be on this committee. I'm now actually with a managed service provider focused on, again, IT and things like that. So definitely, I think that's exactly why I joined the committee, is to understand how the town is doing those things and just any expertise that I can lend. And I think this group, I'm sure, can lend to figure out what's happening, making sure it's, again, efficient and cost efficient, as well as just efficient and helpful for the people who are doing it. I think is great. And it's a fantastic summary, I think. And it's very good to hear that this is not the result of of something bad happening. So I'm happy to hear that part. So, but
I'm usually responsible for whatever deficiencies being discussed. So no, not to worry. Thank you, David. Other comments?
I'm Holly Schultz. I have run IT for architecture and engineering firms for most of the last half of my career. I'm actually a licensed architect, not a technology architect, an architect of buildings. But I've managed IT systems and design applications for many years, and usually the core of that has been disaster recovery, workflow process automation, all that sort of stuff. And one of the areas I'm really interested, just based on what we have seen from just the first meeting, which I'm sure is not much, and I'm sure the department would say there's a lot more behind the scenes that we're totally unaware of at this point, but is having things documented and automated from a disaster recovery point of view. That's usually one of the hardest things to do when you're under the gun, and it sounds like this group is having to support the schools and the town, and making sure that there's comprehensive inventory and process documentation, so that the hit by a bus rule, if anybody walks out or leaves us suddenly, things can run smoothly without any sort of upset in services. I think that's critical. So.
Terrific, thank you. Who else? I'd love to hear from everybody.
And by way of introduction as well, today's obviously my first time with the team, and I would Jeff Krause. My career over the last 20 years has really been around technology companies and technology investments, from startups out in California, where I worked for a number of years, to my current role here in Connecticut with a large international company in the technology arena. So and mailing systems. So the intersection of those things. And I think that, John, your summary, and certainly from my education purpose, or my education point of view, I think it's really important for us to lay that foundation and that common understanding of where are we in terms of our technology approach, assets, and the current programs that are ongoing across the town, and make sure we've got a clear understanding of kind of gathering those all in one place. And that visibility, I think, is a great place to start before we try to tackle what that should look like kind of over the appropriate time horizon. So that'll be certainly a fantastic place for us to move from, and from a point of knowledge of what's going on. So I think your summary sounds great.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Good. Jim?
Obviously, I'm Jim Cogman, Assistant Director of Parks and Rec. Obviously, I have a different perspective than a lot of people on this. That unless you're an employee, I look at it a little bit more of a micro aspect. We're just talking about our park and recreation, how we function, with our website, online registration, reservations for the paddle courts, things like that. So I would like to looking at it as an opportunity just to see what else the town offers. Some of the different departments, how we can work with them, and maybe there's some systems that can work together to make our department a little bit better and a little bit better experience for residents. So I think I'm learning a lot here, being honest. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this and just want to kind of see what other departments are doing. And if there's any opportunity for us to work together, that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Terrific, thank you. And Mr. Adams.
Good morning. John, thank you. It's good to hear that things are good. And from our perspective, things are good, but they can always be better. And it's great to see this collection of IT skill set here. At times IT can become, quote, stagnant, where you're complacent with how things are running. You need an outside eye to see how things can be run differently, better, more efficiently. So really looking forward to see what becomes of this, what we can get out of this together.
Terrific. And I didn't really introduce myself, and hopefully most of you know who I am. Normally I'm in charge of entertainment for committees like this, plus in this case I can actually spell IT. So that's going to be my kind of contribution to this. But no, I'm the CFO for an investment firm and have overseen all, IT departments for companies like this for a decade. And so I don't do it directly, but a lot of that's under my purview. So anyway, I think we've got a great collective set of talent here, and I appreciate everybody kind of joining in. I think since this is an introductory meeting and we haven't done any work to prepare for this session, what maybe we could do is decide sort of what we want to talk about next and what work streams we should undertake to get there. As I mentioned before, lay of the land and description of what we mean in terms of IT. In other words, this, but not this, seems like a good starting point. And I think, I can do some of those off the top of my head, but I think having someone like Jeff sort of be able to speak internally and describe what we have, and then maybe having some of the outside professionals and experts react to that and help shape it, I think would be a good idea. The other thing I want to highlight is Jim's point, which is trying as part of this to not just have a macro view about systems, processes, people, and all of that, but more of a micro view in terms of how the systems work to serve, right? Whether they're serving employees of the town and helping them do what they need to do, or serving our constituents in terms of access to town services. And so I think Jim's point is a very good one. And if I had to hear not criticisms or complaints, but really more along the lines, how could we get more into the 21st century? It's usually along things like that. And that's at the user interface point where a constituent or a resident is trying to get access to services. And sometimes they'll say, well, this is feeling a little 19th century. Could we, move things up a bit? And I get that. Everybody has an opportunity to make those improvements. So I think that macro split will be a good one as we kind of move forward. So I think what maybe the best thing to do is maybe charter a little working committee. There aren't many of us on this group, but I think the main task is to come up with, call it no more than half a dozen pages, right? Just in some slides that provide the overview that I talked about. And you heard what I said, but anybody has a different reaction, but I might organize the pages as follows. Sort of the first one or two pages define IT in terms of our scope and kind of a this, not this way. So here's the inventory of things that you might occur. And then we're ring fencing this. Holly.
I would suggest that there's a step before that, which is,
Sure.
I agree with everything you're saying. This is all great. I just, from going into different firms over my career more than once and needing to sort of figure out what they have and who they have and what their departments are and what the business needs are strategically and what the business is after, and then what does exist in IT. I feel like we still have some fact finding to do, and it's okay if that stuff doesn't exist today, if it's not documented, if there isn't an org chart or a list of departments, et cetera. But I think gathering that, we can't come up with a, even the 6-page slideshow until we really know what exists and what the needs are. So, and as somebody, I mean, I've been on the RTM and everything, but coming from the outside, even something that was handed, I'm sure by Kathleen, to the new first selectman, for example, that says, here's our departments, here's the department heads. Have we surveyed each of the department heads and asked them, with a basic IT satisfaction survey about what systems they're using, if they have any concerns or needs. And even from Jeff's standpoint, I know he sent through Kathleen after the last meeting a list of like computers. But my response to that was, well, what else? Especially if you guys are having to support the schools as well as the town. Do we have an inventory of reprographics equipment, cell phones? What other technology is currently being supported, and do we have inventories of those items? I think it's really hard to start to even make suggestions or figure out a scope if we don't know what exists today and how this department is functioning and who they're serving.
If I could, this committee isn't intended to do the Board of Ed side, so just the town side. We did do a survey a couple years ago of departments on IT, and I have those results, but they're a couple years old, so we would need to redo it. But one of the questions I have, I think it's something that we ran into when we asked everybody, what software programs do you have? In some instances, it's kind of like the police department has a huge list of software that some of it is very particular to what they do. And, like the fingerprinting software and, stuff for the body cameras, or stuff for, how they can go in and look at somebody else's computer. So I don't know how deep we want to go into those programs that service just one, not even one whole department, but one part of the function. Maybe we start with the higher level software programs that everybody has.
Well, and I guess I want to back up if I can. I think I really like what John was saying about, again, scoping what this committee is. And I'm not 100% clear why the Board of Ed would be out of it. I would expect they're one of our largest technology. I mean, I have a daughter who's 15 who's in the high school, and I know, I'm sure we have a huge contract with Google because everything we do is Google. So for technology for the town, what's the reason the Board of Ed wouldn't be part of scope? I would
because we don't have governance over the Board of Education.
I understand that, but doesn't the town pay for, again, I'll use Google as a simple example, for all the Google accounts and for the Chromebooks? Doesn't that come out of the town's budget?
It comes out of the Board of Ed budget,
But
which is part of your tax dollars. But this committee was formed by the Board of Selectmen. It would require an agreement by the Board of Education for us to start delving into their area.
I think,
and I think that's a good discussion point, I guess, for the committee. So yeah, go ahead, Hollis.
Yeah, I'm with David there that I would, and again, I would defer to Jeff and his team, which is, are they supporting the Board of Ed? Are they having to buy the software, support the software? Do they run the budget for that software, or is that responsibility? And again, that goes back to my question, do we have an org chart? Like, who are the staff? How many people are they supporting? All those sorts of metrics are pretty critical when you start to evaluate or come into audit an IT department.
Yeah, so just so you're aware, Jeff is an employee of the Board of Education. The town does not have any IT employees. We contract with the Board of Education to provide our IT support. So Jeff is the head of that department.
Yeah, just to kind of back up a little bit, one of the things everybody's aware is that this kind of split between the Board of Education and the boards and the town or Board of Selectmen on services writ large. It has always been an area of tension. Not to say it's bad, it's just tense. And so there's things like, should we all be on one health insurance plan, or are they split between the Board of Ed and the town? What about IT services? How come we have separate directors of maintenance and facilities for the Board of Education and also for the town, and all that stuff is replicated in terms of vehicles, personnel, all that stuff. And so the tension is because the Board of Education is more of a sovereign entity. Even the Board of Finance can only cut their budget. They can't tell them what to spend money on or how to manage their affairs. And as a result, these really are two sort of separate worlds as a governance matter. And so Kate's right about that. And Jeff oversees IT for everybody. And what we do, as Kate mentioned, is there's a contractual arrangement with Jeff and the Board of Education where he oversees all of that for the town. So I think the remit of this committee is to take that piece of it, that piece that's relevant to the town, which has a lot of its own complexities and separateness from what's going on with the Board of Ed, and try to make that better. And I think the reason it's separate is just in the governance context, it would be quite hard to try to come up with something that would address all of that holistically. I'm reasonably confident, though, that that's okay, because a lot of the IT requirements for the Board of Education are separate and distinct from what we do as a town. There might be some hardware that's in common or servers and processes, but tons of software, applications, needs, simply the staff, the equipment, all that stuff is sufficiently different that I think we could ring fence the town with this committee and still have impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think making a statement about alignment with the IT priorities of the Board of Education and our educational needs, kind of to the extent that we can get any leverage either from a technology, services, or other, without making any recommendations or claiming any purview over those. I think we should try to maintain.
So that's a good point as well. It may actually come out of this committee's work that will surface, excuse me, 3 or 4 areas of either potential cooperation or improvement in the town versus Board of Education IT strategy. This committee may come up with a few things. Look, there were 3 things we really wanted to do. There were clear opportunities for efficiency improvement, but we just can't do that unless the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen come together, right? And we go to the Board of Ed and present that. So I think we don't have to surrender this point about kind of the greater collective view, but maybe it's a sequencing matter where we think about it internally from the town perspective and let maybe potential Board of Ed ideas precipitate out of that.
Is it possible then for us to get, we're asking Jeff for inventory and information about how because it really is about how his department works, even if there are departments that's serving multiple different business units or companies, which often happens even in a big corporate setting, because I've done that. You still, if you're running an IT budget and you're trying to provide services, even if you're delineating within that budget who's paying for what and how what service providers you're using, the only way to really be efficient with IT is to track and document all that so that you can see where there's areas where you can save money or have efficiencies. And so I guess my question would be, is he authorized to, and if not, how do we get him authorized to share that information with us so that we can, from a high level, see what's really going on and what they're juggling and where we might be able to make some strategic recommendations. I think it's incredibly hard to do that if we don't really see the full scope of what's going on currently with the IT department.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent point. My reaction would be that, as I was describing before, sort of, excuse me, what we're doing and how we're getting it done. The reality is that the initial burden on articulating that to this group for our own education purposes, and to get this effort started, is Jeff is going to have to do that, right? As somebody who oversees kind of everything, he's going to be the starting point for here's what we're doing, what we're spending, who's in charge of it, how it works between the town and Board of Education, all these systems, all software, all of that stuff. He's going to be able to articulate to us. And I think if we just start with that kind of education standpoint, then from that will come answers or a process to getting to answers for the things that you raised, Holly, around sort of organization and being able to dive deeper. But that kind of anchoring document will both educate all of us and, importantly, give us a guide to where we might move our inquiry next. So maybe the best way to come up with kind of a 6-page answer or an overview that would allow us to get started is it maybe just starts with Jeff and him articulating that, and then the rest of us sort of asking questions to make sure we're clear. That might be the best way to get started.
John?
Please.
I'm sorry, may I jump in? Hi, it's Krista McNamara. I'm not a member of this committee, though. as an employee, an elected employee here in town hall as your town clerk. I just want to make sure everybody saw the Blum-Shapiro study. Did everyone, so you have that as a base from which you can spring your discussions. That was an item that was put on the agenda when I was on the Board of Selectmen. So I just thought it was helpful for me as a member of the board to understand a little bit more about the IT department, just ensuring that you all have that.
I have not. It would be great. Was that circulated to all of us or made available? If I missed it, I'm sorry.
It was previously, and I can resend it.
Please do. Yeah, that'd be
I think
great.
it talks a little bit about the relationship between the Board of Education, the IT department, and the town. So again, it's a framework from which your committee, I think, might benefit. And I'm interested in hearing how the work goes as a member of the town staff here, and the use of IT. It is critical for me to do my job efficiently also. So thank you for the work you're about to embark on.
No charge. Okay. Other comments? So anyway, super valuable input. I try to be efficient with this meeting. Maybe as a straw man close, what we could do is say, I think the next step is for Jeff to start to educate us. There's a few ways to do that. I suspect that Jeff has materials here and there that describe aspects of our IT function globally that he could probably share with us or compile, excuse me. It might also be a good idea that say at our next meeting, whenever he feels he would be ready, is to maybe present those materials to us. So that will help us along in our education process and maybe help sharpen some of the good points that were made. You know, Jim, your macro point, Holly, some of your diagnostic questions, which I think are great. And then kind of the collective can react to what Jeff presents. And I think through that process, we both get educated and we can have confidence that we've got a complete picture with which to further this effort. Does that sound like the right next step? Comments, questions? Okay. So Jeff, tell us what you think about a timeline to get to that point. Generally kind of what you have, what help you'd like from this group to maybe pull things together that you already have, or maybe you're just ready to go, quickly and we could convene the next meeting pretty soon. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's not a problem. Not a problem. We have plenty of material. I'll just put it into a nice, brief, succinct presentation and present it at the next meeting. Okay.
What we could do is, I don't know how long it would take you to assemble that. And we've kind of talked about Thursdays is not at 9 o'clock. Would next Thursday at 9 o'clock, have we made that our next meeting? Is that too soon for you to have some materials and give us a run through?
Right now, we've got the meeting scheduled for once a month.
Once a month. Ah, okay. All right. Is a month enough time?
Yeah, that's
You can tell the different worlds that you live in.
So here's maybe an idea. If you could get something pulled
You can
together,
circulate it.
maybe pulled together in the next, say, couple of weeks, send it around to the committee. We've got experts on this committee who can read through that. And perhaps some of you could respond to what Jeff says with your questions, which a lot of which have been raised on this call. To the extent they're not answered or they're not teed up to being answered in those materials, why don't you just ping Jeff and pop him a quick question, and maybe with some iteration over the course of this month. By the time we get to the next meeting in March, there will have already been a fair bit of sort of email discussion and dialogue on that that would help. The only thing I would caution you is that one rule we need to follow with these meetings like this. This is a public committee. And so we want to make sure that we do business in public, on camera, in a documented meeting. What we don't want to do is get into sort of the entire committee seeing questions and arguing and debating back and forth, because that's not transparent to the public. So what I would have you do, Jeff, is if you'll send the materials out when you do that, with everybody on the committee blind copied, so we all get it and we can see it. And if you have questions, respond to Jeff directly and just ask your questions that way. Or you can respond to Jeff and just copy me. That way we're not conducting business with a quorum of people part of the discussion. But as chairman, if I kind of hear everything, I will have seen everything globally, and I can make sure when we do have a public discussion that everything is covered and it's transparent to everyone. So hopefully that's clear.
So I guess I'm not clear. What exactly are we asking Jeff to send, or Jeff, what do you have in your head that you're going to send us? Is it like the detail of the computers was great, but I don't know where that came from, but that's not, I'm looking for something a little higher level.
Right. I'm going to collect, we have inventory of peripherals. You'll get a picture of what our data room looks like. You'll get a picture of how the contract works with the Board of Ed, what services are provided, give you an org chart, and any processes that we have documented.
Just out of curiosity, does the town, I don't want to dig in too deep now because I know this sounds like what we'll do next meeting. Does the town have kind of bigger software as a service, providers? Like, again, I'll go back. What I know is the Board of Ed has Google, and obviously Google is and things like that, contracts and stuff like that you can share with us, not the actual contract, but the dates and who they're with and things.
Well, go ahead, Kate.
Well, I was going to say, we can put together all the things that the different departments use. I don't want to get too far down into the weeds with some of them with, we use Microsoft products.
But for example, I'll stop you there. Are we using Microsoft 365 in the cloud for software as a service? Or do we have an Exchange, just go Exchange server on site in the data center that?
No, it's in the cloud.
It isn't, right. So that's what I'd be interested in. Like, what's
Yeah.
the cloud? Right. Or both. Sorry. Thank you, Holly. Or
Yeah,
what's
how
the
do we get a
cloud contract?
software? Yeah, we need a software inventory that's just as detailed as your hardware inventory. Not your.
Oh.
We don't need to see your back of house contracts, but just single line items in an Excel spreadsheet, for example, that lists it, a column that's what department it's used for. Maybe there's different codes for each department or for all. When the contract started, whether it's cloud based or on site. Basic,
that's
basic information that we could look at a chart that clearly delineates all the software that's in use.
I'll admit, though, I'm a geek. A picture of the data center, I would love that. Just feel free to send that over.
We have assembled the right team, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so Jeff and I can work together to make sure we get the full list of the software, because he handles all the ones, like the Microsoft products. And I will make sure with the departments that we have an up-to-date list of the software that individual departments use.
Super.
And also your survey that you talked about, Jeff, whether you ran that or Kathleen did, I'd love to see a copy of the survey that was run last time. I've done a number of those over the years, and I'd love to see if that's something this committee could, work with you on too, in terms of creating an updated survey to maybe gather the most useful information possible from the current employees.
Okay.
Fantastic. Any other comments, questions for the good of the order? Okay, so Kate, when is our next meeting?
It is, I believe, in a month, March 17th, High Holy Day.
Okay, 3/17, and I guess Linda will send around invites. We've got all the particulars. I think this is great. So just to confirm our next steps, Jeff is going to work on assembling a variety of pages. Just take a stab at it in terms of pulling together the who, what, when, where, why, just overview of our IT world. Send it around to the committee. If any individuals have got questions they'd like to either clarify with Jeff or add and suggest as potential additions to those slides, that'd be great. And then what we'll do at our next meeting on the 17th is have Jeff simply present those slides and present us with that overview. And then coming out of that, hopefully some clear next steps about where we could spend our time would materialize. All sound good?
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So nothing else. Let me go ahead and close this meeting and we'll reconvene on the 17th. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, David, thanks. And second. Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. All right. We stand adjourned. Thanks very much. We'll see you guys in a month.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank you.
All right. Adios.
Thank you.
Thanks.